Thank you all for joining us here on Spreaker.com, National Sports Radio presentation. Thank you for joining us as Robert Dieters, the commissioner, alongside your host, Nick Rice, for the NFL Team Breakdown segment. This is show number 14 of what has been a real successful series here on Spreaker. We're bringing the Indianapolis Colts to you, and we had some technical difficulties earlier, but we'll recap some of the highlights involved with the Colts, starting with what we thought was potentially one of the better offenses in the league. We took a look at their best free agent acquisition, and Robert, I think it's Hakeem Nicks, but you have a little something on the defensive side of the ball that you like.
Let's go. Well, Jackson really made on that defense from Cleveland. Cleveland didn't make a decision by getting Jackson deserved to a playoff. I think this is a perfect.
Yeah, sorry, we're having some audio difficulties. I hope you all are able to catch that. DeQuell Jackson, former Browns, signed with the Colts. I think he's another great player that they signed. The draft we didn't like all too well. Maybe one player that will become a great player is Adante Moncrief. I mean, if he could be tutored by anybody, how about Andrew Luck and Reggie Wayne, who comes back from injury? This is a team that went 11-5 last year, and Indianapolis has a real shot to not only win the AFC South, but win a playoff game again. They beat the Chiefs after trailing by 28 points. When you take a look at the depth chart, the quarterback is obviously the strength of that team. Halfbacks is a concern, but when you take a look at the receiving core, along with the tight ends that you throw in there, I think it's a really good unit there for the Colts moving forward.
Nick, there's no concern. The wide receiver core, you got to say this. An A-, B+ type grade. If you're tight end, B+ type grade. That O-line is a big concern as well, as they really do not help out Andrew Luck at all. He got sacked 2 times last season.
Yeah, we pegged that unit as about a C to a C-, which actually, given that before I put it at a B+, the overall offensive grade is a B. When you take a look at just how poor that offensive line is, Anthony Costanzo, a great player, but they lost to Samson Satele, former Raider, and he's no longer an Indianapolis Colt, which causes some concern for them. When you take a look at the defense, it's about a B, a grade overall for them, as well as potentially the biggest loss for them was an Antoine Bethea in the secondary.
Antoine Bethea was unfortunate to lose to that defense, but as I said, they did get it to Cole Jackson. They still have Rob Mathis there. Secondary, though, is going to struggle this season, as we said, so a C+ to a B- type of grade for that safety cornerback position.
Yeah, overall, just some causes for concern. But if there is a team that has potentially the best overall position in the coaching staff, it is led by Pagano, the Indianapolis Colts. We put them at about an A overall in the coaching staff because when you take a look at Indianapolis, their overall point differential is as close to 500, as close to 0 as you could possibly have it. But the Colts still figure out a win to win against not only a number of great playoff teams, the Seattle Seahawks, the San Francisco 49ers, but the Colts also figure out a way to go 6-0 for back-to-back years in the AFC South, which is obviously the division is not as strong as it used to be, but still Indianapolis always figures out a way to win the games that they have to and throw in a couple playoff wins as well. The talent does not suggest an 11-5 record, even with Reggie Wayne down, and also a playoff win after trailing by 28. This may be one of the worst teams to go to the divisional round of the playoffs, but when you have a coaching staff like a Pagano, I mean, you have to be impressed with what Indianapolis did last season and the potential they have with Wayne in the lineup for this coming year.
I feel like the Colts have a lot of heart, and Pagano really brings that to this team. He really knows how to manage the Colts, and he has a good relationship with Andrew Luck, and I think that's how this team really works by. But Nick, I gotta say, I know we're gonna just give our final thoughts here about this team, but Nick, this offense, I love Andrew Luck. I've loved watching Stanford my whole life, and he's been one of my favorite players to watch. Well, he made it to the big leagues, and look what he's done: 23 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and threw over 3,500 yards this season. Not too shabby for a guy that doesn't have a great O-line, but the tight end position is that 1-2 punch. You have a strong wide receiver core. Hakeem Nicks is a really big steal for the Indianapolis Colts. Then you have DeQuell Jackson, who I believe is going to be one of their best defensive players. When you have two inside linebackers at over 100 tackles this season, that is pretty damn scary. And you have Robert Mathis at 19.5 sacks, which I don't believe he's going to get that ever again. But I think he's going to at least get in the double-digit mark for sacks once again this season. D-line can get the job done. Ricky Jean-Francois is probably my favorite guy on that D-line just because he was a former 49er, and he's one of their more talented players I like to watch out for on that D-line. Kind of a big guy. And on that corner, on the secondary, I think Vontae Davis is their best player in the secondary.
Secondary pretty good, but that defensive line, Arthur Jones a great player, and those front seven guys, when you include Robert Mathis and DeQuell Jackson, that defense pretty formidable. We mentioned top 10 in points per game allowed last season.
And why are we forgetting about Terrell Freeman? He had the most tackles last season. He still had 5.5 sacks, 2 interceptions. Some guys that he's kind of an underrated type of player for the Colts and for the NFL, and a lot of people know who he is.
Yeah, obviously Indianapolis defense is not the mantra for them, but listen, I mean, we saw it last year. Defense definitely does win championships. When you look at Seattle, how dominant they were. I mean, throw out the Super Bowl, please. You can't put the Super Bowl as a basis for all teams to count on because that was just a flop. The Broncos aren't losing that game 9 times out of 10 by 30 points and more. Actually, 32 points. Throw that game out, but defense will get you to win games, and I believe that Pagano knows that. He drafted a number of defensive players, even though offensive line was their biggest concern, which actually does, in a way, create a huge question. Do the Colts even figure out a way to win 11 games this coming season? I know the schedule isn't quite as hard. They don't play the NFC West. But Indianapolis still has a shot to really struggle with an offensive line that many peg to be one of the worst in the league.
Well, Nick, still in 2013, they got a win over the Seahawks and the 49ers, so give them credit. They can get some wins over playoff teams, but they did lose they also lost to some playoff teams. You know, you talk about the San Diego Chargers. You lose to the Cincinnati Bengals, which is, I think that was kind of a win they should have had, but you know, you lose games and it's tough to come back. But they lost 2 games they should have won. They got blown out. You could say 38-8 and a 40-11 to 2 NFC West opponents. Then you lose to the Cincinnati Bengals 42-28. Nick, I mean, this team is looking still pretty damn good. I mean, their Week 1 win kind of gave them, I think, was really to show how good they are and got on that 3-game winning streak, week 3 through 5. But you know, out of the 3-game winning streak in the beginning, the 2 impressive wins were at San Francisco and at home versus Seattle.
Definitely the highlights of a season that included a wild card win over the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll just recap really quick the schedule that I have for the Indianapolis Colts. They start off with a Sunday night matchup against the Denver Broncos in Mile High. I give them the loss in Week 1. Then after that, I think they win 6 straight. They beat the Eagles at home, defeat the Jaguars on the road. They're home for the Titans and the Ravens back-to-back weeks. I think they win those games. Then they're at the Houston Texans before a Week 7 contest against the Bengals. Those are 6 games, all of which I think the Colts win because similar to last year, Indianapolis, I think, comes out to a really hot start. They were 6-1 a year ago. At this time, they're 6-1 here again. But here's where I guess the tread comes off the tracks. I think in Week 8, they lose at the Steelers and then at the Giants. 2 road games. Then they go into the bye and have potentially the worst situation following a week off. It's home against the Patriots on Sunday night. You got to believe New England. They're not exactly an early bloomer, but they blossom late, and I think they win, or the Patriots do, over the Colts. Week 12, home for the Jaguars. I think that's a win. And then home, one more time, against the Redskins. I think that's a game that they lose. The Redskins listen, guys, no joke, 1 and 2. This is a team that has the potential to really go far in the playoffs with Deshaun Jackson. And then weeks 14 through 16, I think they win at the Browns versus the Texans, then at the Cowboys. Last week of the season, listen, pencil this down, guys. This Week 17 contest at the Tennessee Titans, I think the Colts fall to that one. Ken Whisenhunt has himself a really nice up-and-coming season there for the Tennessee Titans. I think the Colts finish out the season with that loss, 10-6 on the year.
All right, we'll move on to my schedule here. Week 1 at Denver, they get the loss. I think Denver is a pretty strong team. You go to Week 2 versus Philadelphia at home, I think they still get the loss. They struggle against some playoff teams. Then at Week 3, they get the win at Jacksonville. Then at Week 4, they get a win versus Tennessee. Week 5, they get a win versus Baltimore. Then Week 6, they're going to get the loss here. I think Jadeveon Clowney and J.J. Watt will give a run for their money. Then you get a win versus Cincinnati. Win at Pittsburgh. Nick, what did I say for the New York Giants?
You think they win at the Giants, too?
All right, well, they do get the win at the New York Giants. And versus New England, I think they're going to get the loss. That's going to be a tough game for them. Then when you go to Week 12, they're going to beat Jacksonville. Week 13, they're going to lose to Washington. I think this is a toss-up for me, but I think they're going to get the loss. I think they go 2-1 in that homestand. Then they go Week 14 at Cleveland, and Nick, I said a win, right?
Yes.
All right, good. Then Week 15 versus Houston, they get the win. I think Andrew Luck comes back in Indianapolis and gets the job done. Then Week 16, they get the win. And Week 17, they're going to sweep Tennessee. And I believe that's 11-5 for me.
11-5 for the Colts again, given that schedule does become a little bit easier for them. Still, the Indianapolis Colts, a pretty good ball club, even with the free agent departures.
Nick, did you say 11-5 too?
I said 10-6.
6. That's a little shocking for me, but okay. Well, 11-5 for this squad for me. I think they're a pretty impressive ball club. They have a Pittsburgh can be a toss-up game. I think maybe a Tennessee game could be a toss-up, but still, let's find out what this team can do this season. But Nick, I guess I gotta say for the best free agent acquisition is Cole Jackson, just because this guy came from Cleveland. He had the most tackles for that squad, and he's gonna be joined up with a Jarrell Freeman. Those two are just gonna be a 1-2 punch for that squad. I think their best player is gonna be this is actually gonna be a really good pick for me. I think Reggie Wayne. I think he's gonna come back from his injury and really show some people that he could still play. And just because he's old doesn't mean he can't get the job done. Then you go to under the radar. I think under the radar for me, I think it's going to be you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to take a chance on Eric Walden on the left outside linebacker. Nick, you're probably really shocked, but just because he's joined up with the Robert Mathis, I think Robert Mathis might decline this season. I think Eric Walden steps up for the Indianapolis Colts.
Definitely interesting. And then the free agent acquisition, DeQuell Jackson, former Cleveland Brown. Both of us think he's going to be a great player for the Colts. Offensive grade is a B. Defensive grade is a B. I have them at 10-6, but I mean, listen, they could easily, in my opinion, go 9-7 or 8-8 this year because that offensive line is. To say that they are a weak link is a huge understatement. But then that divisional, then they could easily go 5-1 or 6-0 in the division, and that schedule is easier for them as well. So I think overall 10-6 or 11-5, a solid grade for an offense that still can get it done.
This team cannot go 9-7 or 8-8. I mean, they have about the same O-line. I don't get why you're making that point there. I mean, they have the same O-line. He adds another weapon with an Akeem Nicks. So I'm not getting why you're saying that point.
Well, Houston did have one of the better receiving cores in the AFC South, and you saw exactly how they flopped. Atlanta had a really good receiving core, but their offensive line was whack, and that's how they went 4-12 after going to the NFC Championship a year ago.
I don't think it was the defense at all for the Falcons.
Defense obviously contributed. I don't think the Colts go 4-12, but I'm just saying look out for Indianapolis. Many peg them to be really good, but just I'm throwing a red flag. You trail 28-0 against the Chiefs. I mean, they should have easily came away with that one. I think it was more Kansas City loss.
They didn't have Reggie Wayne. Kansas City Chiefs defense isn't that bad. It could be pretty tough once in a while, but they still lost. Their defense fell off the charts, and their offense. Alex Smith only had Jamal Charles to throw to. Well, guess who figured that out? The Colts did. They did something about it. The defense figured out that you just got to double team Jamal Charles, and they did in the playoffs. Period. Watching that game, watching those highlights, they literally just stopped Jamal Charles, and that's what. If you can stop Jamal Charles in this league, in the Kansas City Chiefs, you win games.
Jamal Charles is a really good player for them.
But he was the only target. I mean, you have Dwayne Bowe, but still, Dwayne Bowe didn't do that much. They don't really have anyone else for that wide receiver core for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Definitely, the Colts have a much better receiving core, but I mean, we can also go on about the next team that we're going to cover. Coming up next on NFL Team Breakdowns is it's going to be an interesting type of a discussion here because this is going to be a far more controversial subject. Will the Chicago Bears figure out a way to win the NFC North? A healthy Aaron Rodgers, and obviously is going to be putting them a run for their money, but Chicago also gets a lot of their playmakers back in action. It's going to be interesting to watch, but given the time, that'll just about do it here for NFL Team Breakdowns. Alongside Robert Dieters, the commissioner, I'm your host, Nick Rice. Apologize for an extremely short show. We had technical difficulties all day today, but live from Spreaker.com, tune in for the Chicago Bears Team Breakdown coming up at the waning final couple moments there on Sunday night. We should, I believe, have the Bears coming up very soon. Alongside Robert Dieters, this is Nick Rice. Don't drink and drive, or don't drink at all. Guys, have a fantastic 4th of July weekend. It's Independence Day coming up tomorrow, and make sure to stay safe out there. So thank you all one more time, and that is the Colts and the NFL Team Breakdowns. This is the Chicago Bears coming up soon.